Welcome to Chat with a Lawyer, where a lawyer gives practical advice to everyday people. My name is Walla Blagay, and I'm your host. And we're going to be talking about family issues today, family affairs. We're going to be talking about custody, divorce, marriages, domestic violence, among other things. And today we have our renowned guest, Rosalyn Pugh, who is a well-known family lawyer. Now, Rosalyn Pugh is also a celebrity because she is former clerk of the court, so it's good that she was able to take time from her busy schedule to join us today. Now, Rosalyn, tell us a little bit more about your practice.
Well, thank you for having me here today, Walla. I have been a lawyer since 1983 when I was sworn into the state of Maryland's bar. And since that time, I've worked with some pretty well-known lawyers, William Murphy Jr. in Baltimore City, with Judge Taylor's firm when he retired and decided to open his own practice, and then with my own firm since 1992. But for that brief stint in 2001 through 2006 when I was clerk of the circuit court. So my practice has been from that point in time throughout, either in the practice of family law, criminal law, some real estate transactions, and some business law, but mostly focusing on the area of litigation.
All right. Well, what are some of the issues that you run into as a family lawyer practitioner when we talk about, let's focus on custody issues.
Okay. Well, custody issues are very difficult, high conflict areas in a lot of situations. It doesn't have to be that way, but unfortunately, a lot of times when people fall out of love, they also have the children in common that they now can't agree on how the parenting process should go along. So you have one parent who may be what we would call the primary custodian, and that person ends up being the one who is the physical custodian when the other party separates. And when that situation happens, the parties have to decide, well, how are we going to agree to parent this child even though we are no longer in the relationship? Because just because a relationship has ended doesn't mean parental responsibilities have ended. And so we have, thanks to the ERA, because in the old days we used to have a maternal preference. There was some presumption that children would be in the care of the mother when there was a separation or even in a divorce situation, but now that's no longer the case. The child is not presumed to be the child of the mother.
Now, you said ERA. Now, explain to us what that is.
The Equal Rights Amendment. Back in the 70s, I suppose, is when the Equal Rights Amendment was passed, and at that point in time, we started to see a change in the laws reflecting the fact that women and men are on the same footing. What that does mean is that even with respect to what we were doing in that respect, where we were helping women in terms of the discrimination that heretofore had happened to them. But then there was discrimination in the area of men in the family law area. Men could not get alimony in the old days, now they can. Men could not get custody without a bad showing that the mother was unfit in the old days. Now there is always a situation where the father is just as apt to get custody as the mother, and that's a positive thing that we think has happened over the years, because studies have shown that when both parents are involved, children turn out a lot better in terms of their future, how they turn out.
Now, now that we're touching on that issue, there is an important movement going on in Prince George's County, and I know some of my friends are involved with this, where there is a push for joint custody. We talked about the best interest of the child standard, and some men feel that many of the judges are more likely to give custody to the mother, full physical custody. They don't have access to their children. So there's a whole movement into advocating for a change in Maryland law for joint custody. And can you talk a little bit about that? What's your take as a family lawyer?
That's not only a statewide move, but that's a national move. There are fathers united everywhere for the purpose of coming to the courthouse and saying, we have rights too as parents, and we can be parents just like mothers can be parents. And in those situations where there has to be a determination, no one should have the upper hand. And I I'm fortunate, I represent both men and women in these custody battles, and I have not seen any less genuineness or desire in men to have custody than I've seen in women. Men can parent their children, and in many instances they have been the primary custodian, even though the woman may have been in the home. So it's not a situation where anyone should go into the courthouse or the courtroom with biases about either parent, that one parent should, just because of the fact of how they look, well, she's a female, she should have the nurturing skills. Well, that's not necessarily true. I know I grew up in a home where my father was very close to me and my sister and I should say. And because of that, I have a very open mind about the custody process. And I have to say, and I'm glad to see that in the courts, I've practiced in a lot of courts throughout Maryland. I don't just go to Prince George's County, but I've been to Charles County, I've been to Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Baltimore County, and I have to say that the judges in all of these areas are now more astute and more likely to recognize the fact that either parent can be the primary custodian, and there is no reason to presume that just because the children are with the mother or just because the children are with the father because the father took them, that the mother should get them back. That's not the standard now. It's the best interest of a child, and in many instances, the best interest of a child. And for most purposes, studies have shown the best interest of a child is to have both parents involved as much and as often as possible, because it even speaks on the issue of child support. Parents who have to send money to a child that they don't have any interaction with, it's a little bit more difficult to understand what's going on with that money versus when you see that child every day and you know that child's feet are getting bigger every day, and so you know mom had to buy some tennis shoes, or you know dad had to spend this money on tennis shoes. So you see where this money is going, and then you have an appreciation for the fact that your child has every opportunity to be the best child that he can be and to get the best opportunities, including schools, going to school with clean clothes on, coming home to a clean house where they sleep on a bed and not on the floor. Right. These are things that are very important to a child growing up to be the best that he can be in a constructive person in society. So it is important how custody determinations are made, because they can affect a child's well-being for the long haul. And we do want to see, for the best interest of society, that children do well.
So are you in support of changing the law? Or?
I have always been in support of the presumption that both parents are fit. And I think that that is the case, that whether it's in the books that way or not, that is the case. But in the area of changing the law, I think if the judges apply the best interest test the way they should, the law would not need to be changed. There are some people who are in positions of authority who still have that old archaic idea that mothers are the nurturing parents, and so that's what we need to do. We need to change minds and change attitudes about the process as opposed to changing the law. I don't think the law is prefers or shows a preference for either party, and I don't know that putting it in the books in black and white is going to make that any different.
Interesting. Well, let's switch over a little bit now. Let's talk about maybe new couples that are coming and looking to get married. So here's some of, from your practice, what are some things that they should be thinking about? Prenups, or things what are some of the issues that you run in for new couples that they should be aware of going into marriage?
The most important thing that people who go into marriage should be aware of with respect to each other than whether they love each other or not, that's something I can't. I didn't get that from law school.
Not for lawyers.
I didn't get that from law school. But they ought to know what the finances of the other party are, because if they don't know what the other party is doing in terms of how they manage their finances, then they are not, and the two of them are not in one accord on how those finances are going to be managed when they get into that marital relationship, then there are going to be problems from the beginning. You want to go into things with everything on the table. Do you have bad credit? If you have bad credit, how are we going to get this house together? How is your name going to go in this house? How are we going to get financing? You might be making $150,000 a year, but if you are overspending your income, and so your credit now is you filed bankruptcy in the last 3 years, well, you know, you're getting a house versus me getting a house without you. That's the issues you're talking about. And so people need to really consider the financial circumstances of the other parties. Prenuptial agreements in this area. Prenuptial agreements meaning that people, by a contract prior to the time they get married, decide how the finances are going to play out and what I own. Am I going to keep it as my own, or am I going to, now that we're married, is it going to become yours and mine? So these are the issues that people have to think about when they're getting into marriage. But most of us in this area, prenuptial agreements, you think about if you're Beyonce and Jay-Z. But if you're Rosalyn Pugh and somebody else, I don't think we need a prenuptial agreement. But the bottom line is that it can have some significance when, say, parties are remarrying after they've had children with someone else or something along those lines, and they want the property that they've acquired during the time they were married to someone else to be protected from the what we have as the marital property laws in Maryland, and that might be a reason to do prenuptial agreements. But for the most part, our Maryland law sort of protects people anyway, because our Maryland property laws say that if you had something before the marriage, for the most part, it's going to remain your property. Now, this is my disclaimer. That's a general statement, because there are so many exceptions to that rule, and there are so many laws that come into play, or situations that come into play, that once something you own before the marriage can take on a marital property interest too. And that's like if you own a house and you just bought it 2 years ago, and then you come into the marriage and you and your wife stay in there 20 years, you're not going to be able to say, well, this marriage, I had this before the marriage, because clearly, unless you paid it all off before the marriage, then it's not going to be marital property. It is going to be, some portion of it should be thought of as marital property, unless there's been some agreement to the contrary, or you inherited it from someone and it was paid off. Those kinds of issues come up. But for the most part, marital, the divorce laws in Maryland are somewhat complicated, and I know there is, and we're going to probably talk about this later on, that they push toward self-representation, and we need to address the fact that even if you're going to represent yourself, it is a good idea to talk to a lawyer first and then see if you can handle it from there.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and talk about some of the other issues, self-representation and also domestic violence.
We're here today to ask people about marriage.
For starters, what's the best thing about being married?
Who I get to stay married to.
This person.
Having a companion.
Do you think your marriage is good for more than just the two of you?
Oh, sure, and it'll affect generations after us.
The energy we give out in our home, I think, spreads out to other people.
Sort of stabilizes your whole community. It's a cornerstone of a society, right?
Want to improve your marriage? For ideas, go to foryourmarriage.org. A message from the Catholic Church.
Welcome back, everyone, to Chat with the Lawyer, where lawyers give practical advice to everyday people. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and we are talking with Rosalyn Pugh, our renowned lawyer on family law issues. Now, we were just talking about self-representation. We were segue into that issue. Now, a lot of people get summons to the court, and they say, I'm just going to go represent myself. I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have time to spend money. I've got money issues. I'm just going to go represent myself. Now, what are some of the problems or risk of self-representation? Can you tell us a little more about that?
All right, self-representation is something that has been sort of encouraged to some extent by our judiciary in recent years, and through promotion of forms that are online for parties to file for their own divorce, file for custody, file for child support even though we have the Office of Child Support Enforcement that will do that for any person who has a child and is in need of support and needs the parent to contribute.
Now tell us a little bit more. You said the Office of Child Support Enforcement. What is that? That
is a governmental agency that is available in every county in this state, where if you are in need of getting child support for your child and the other party's not paying, that you can go to the Office of Child Support Enforcement, pay an administrative fee, which is really about $25 just for the processing, and they will, on your behalf, go into court if necessary, because they don't have to go into court to have the child support set. They will try to get the other party to agree to a reasonable amount of support. And we have in Maryland the child support guidelines, as you know, which are pretty much, the child support guidelines are a computational process by which the courts or whomever is going to establish child support establishes what a parent is supposed to pay. And a lot of times people, because of the fact that the person who's not in custody of the child has to pay the money, and it may come out of their check by wage lien, or they're paid by wage lien, they feel like the other party's not contributing. But in reality, that formula that we use in the state of Maryland takes into consideration what each party is supposed to contribute. And the party who is not in the home then sends the money to the party who is in the home with the child. And because we do take into consideration, if parties are both having custody of their child, we take into consideration that both parties have custody, and there's a formula that applies to that versus a sole custody formula. So there is the child support guidelines take into consideration a lot of different scenarios in which parents might have, one parent may have the child half of the time, and the other parent may have the child half the time. You're not going to pay the same amount as you would pay if you had them only every other weekend. You're going to pay less if you have the child more. So because the court's recognizing that you're spending money on that child when that child is in your care also. So child support is a very important right of the child and not of the parent, that we in Maryland and every state recognizes, and therefore that's why they have these child support enforcement agencies that go and advocate. Well, I guess they really, I can't say advocate.
I mean, do they have lawyers that represent people for child support issues?
They do.
Okay.
They do. And then when I say represent, they are there to do what's best for the child. They're not necessarily taking the position of either parent. They're doing what's best for the child. Say someone has a court order that requires them to pay $500 per month and they lose their job. Then they're going to represent that parent in trying to get the child support modified. So they don't represent any parent just because they have the child. They represent what's in the best interest of the child. And so generally, but those people who need to get child support need to go to the Office of Child Support Enforcement if they cannot afford to do so on their own or get an attorney on their own to do so. But back to the issue of self-representation, that is a very difficult area to navigate, because it's important that parties know what their rights are. And because we have such a complicated marital property law in Maryland, it is very advisable for anybody who's thinking about getting a divorce in this state. If you own any piece of property, if you live in a house that's being owned by you and your current spouse, it's important that you get some advice on how to resolve that issue. Even if you're going to try to represent yourself in court and use the forms that are online. They really are meant, the forms that are online, in my estimate, are really meant for those people who don't have a lot in controversy and basically don't have a lot to fight about. But even if you are going to do that, we have, not only can you pay an attorney for a one-time consultation, but you can go up to the courthouse and there's free legal advice there, that you can meet with an attorney and they can at least give you some background information to help you out on that.
Well, you know, the courthouse is a little scary for many of us. Now, you just walk in, and so, you know, you just ask the guard after you go through the line where to go. Where is who do you talk to?
Exactly. It's just that simple. If you ask a guard at the courthouse about where the free lawyer is, they will be able to tell you where that person is. And those people are on duty certain times of the day at the courthouse. On Fridays, they are a limited amount of time, so you might want to go during the weekdays because they are there only for specific periods of time. You can call the courthouse, the library, court library. Everyone in that area will be able to tell you how to get the free legal advice from a lawyer if you need to do that. And that person can even, if you take the forms with you, show you how to use the forms and go through that process.
Now, do you know of any, now this is important for us to realize that self-representation could carry a great risk. So do you have any stories of somebody who, or something, or someone in general that really lost a great deal from self-representation, something that people should even think about when, that one story that said, okay, I don't want that to be me?
Well, the difficulty of sharing stories with you is they could be my clients, and so there's that attorney-client privilege, and so when we talk about things, and even if I talk about something that might be remotely close to some of my clients, they'll be, you're talking about me on TV. So we're not going to talk about sharing stories, but I will say that you need to be careful if you own real estate, if you have a pension or retirement benefits, if you have a 401k, that's a retirement benefit, any of those kinds of things, you really need to be careful and talk to a lawyer before you decide you're going to try to take that responsibility of representing yourself on yourself.
I got you, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about domestic violence. Now, I know Prince George's County, I think it was in the Essence magazine maybe 4 or 5 years ago that Prince George's County had a great deal of domestic violence. And we want to talk about that today because many are suffering from domestic violence, and this is not just men, it could be women also. What are some general things that people should be aware of?
Well, the first thing is that there is a law that there are some protections in place for people who are experiencing physical abuse in their homes. And they may feel there is not an out, but there are a lot of outs. There's the House of Ruth. There are different shelters for battered spouses where people can go if they feel that they don't have anywhere else to go, and they don't have to put up with physical abuse in the home. Similarly, they don't have to put up with physical abuse of their children or mental abuse of their children. Now, that statute is there for the protection of people and not to be abused by people who simply just want to get their spouse in trouble, or they want to get the an extra hand because, as you may know, the protective violence statute, the domestic violence statute, not only gives you the right to have protection from being abused, but it also can award you use of your home and put the other party out of the home during a period of time. There is some relief in the form of custody for the children if you need that. And there is emergency family maintenance in a situation where you may not have the wherewithal to pay the mortgage on the home, etc., while this other spouse is out of the home. So domestic violence is an area where we all know or have seen people in situations where they have been afraid of their other spouse and felt like they had nowhere to go. Thank God we now have the domestic violence statute, and if we use it properly, people can be protected and they can have some peace of mind and some ability to go on with their life despite the fact this terrible situation is going on where either their significant other, who's the father of their child or the mother of their child, or their husband or wife can no longer be in a position where they can abuse them or take advantage of them in a situation. And so we take domestic violence very seriously. There's a statute that has recently passed to show you how seriously we take it. The legislature every year is doing something to make the domestic violence statutes more strong. And this year what they've done is there was the standard of proof for proving that you were being abused was clear and convincing. Well, the legislature now has come up with a new standard. It's preponderance of the evidence, something you might be familiar with in a normal civil case. So you don't have to show now clear and convincing evidence. You only have to show that it more likely happened than not. And then you can get a protective order in a situation, and therefore you can feel in some way that you can be protected from this person who's threatening you, who might have abused you in the past, who might have abused the children. There is some protection there now.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the vehicles that can be used for protection for someone that's suffering?
Now, anybody who feels that they have been abused by their spouse, There are two different ways to deal with that. One is the criminal process, where you can go to a commissioner, tell the commissioner I've been assaulted, and the commissioner can, if they believe there's enough evidence, probable cause, to charge this person with assault, they could charge that person criminally.
Now, who's a commissioner?
The commissioner, district court commissioners in Maryland are these independent people who have college degrees, not necessarily law degrees, but they are stationed in each, most every police station. There's one in Hyattsville, there's one at the courthouse, there's one at the jail in Prince George's County, there's one in the Oxon Hill Police Station. These commissioners review things, review people's paperwork to see if there's enough evidence to charge people with crimes. Well, those commissioners also serve the purpose of, when the courthouse isn't open, they can issue domestic violence temporary protective orders. And in those situations, if they do, it's an ex parte order that they issue, then the judge reviews it the next court date to make sure that the commissioner had enough evidence. And then, so there's potentially a three-tier process for domestic violence. One, you can go in front of a commissioner.
Now, do you need a lawyer to go before the
You
commissioner?
don't need a lawyer, and you don't need any money. All you need to do is go up there. You need transportation to get to the commissioner, but that's all you need. And once you get there, that commissioner can make a determination. If they see that there is some evidence of abuse, they can issue that ex parte order. And then that's the weekends and things like that when there's no court open. If there's a court open, of course, the court's going to be able to issue that order. That's a temporary order, and then you get the final hearing. It's a very quick turnaround time, and so if you are going to get a lawyer, you're going to need to get one very quickly after you go and get that first protective order, so that you can be in a position to put the best case forward for yourself. The House of Ruth represents people who are victims of domestic violence. They don't represent everybody who's a victim, but if you apply to them and they feel your case is appropriate, they will do it for you. And those people are associated with the courthouse. They usually have an office location in the courthouse where they can assist you. And the protections that you have, the shelters where they don't let the victimizer know where you're staying, so that you don't have to be concerned about your safety in that sense, that they're going to find you. Some people don't want to stay in the marital home because even though they get a protective order that says stay away, they still are not feeling warm and fuzzy that that person's going to stay away. They can actually go to a shelter where their whereabouts will not be known.
Yeah, if you need to run back and forth to your house to get a few things, are police usually able to escort you? How do you go about that process?
There is, I think through federal grant money, the sheriff's office is the primary law enforcement agency in this county who does that. So you would contact the sheriff's department and arrange a time to go in. But generally, that's only going to be a one-time thing. You're not going to be going back every week or every day. The sheriff's going to give you one time to go in and get your things, and then from that point on, it's up to the court whether they let you back in or not in.
And now we're wrapping up. And any last words that you have for anyone that's watching this?
Well, I guess my last words are: you need to be careful about who you get involved with, number one. And then number two, when you feel that you need legal redress, it's there. The courthouse is there. There are free services that are there. You should not be afraid to ask someone for the services you need, because it's in the best interest of all of us that everybody's safe, that children are doing well, and that parents have a right to parent their child.
Well, thank you, Rosalyn Pugh, for coming with us today and giving us great advice.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.